Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name's JC, and today I'm going over my top 8 deck profile for Springfest Houston Tri-Regulation. I was in the premium seat. We actually just got back. I'm doing the deck profile right now while my ideas while the event is fresh and while all my ideas are still arranged well. I performed very well today. I actually went, we had 7 rounds of Swiss and I went personally undefeated. Team went X1. Things just ran very, very smoothly. I've been testing for this particular event for quite some time since I haven't had been able to participate in a premium tournament in a while. So I actually want to get shout outs out of the way first. Shout outs to people on the team that helped me test. So Frank, Jack, but biggest shout out goes out to Lupe because I put that man through so many games, especially over the past week while he and I had more time off from work. So huge shout out to Lupe. Thank you. It really helped me get all my ideas fresh, especially for the main deck. Like I really was able to iron out exactly what I wanted for the current format. But without further ado, I think I'll just get right into it. So for starters, we do play 4 Oboro. It's like the most important card in the deck, not just because of crest, because yes, this is a crest build, but mostly because of your history stride. The history stride is really what advanced this deck to the next level, in my opinion, because first or second, you're instantly going up to GB2, and that's just going to make your Rene turn all the better. And obviously we're talking about the G zone last, but you will hear me talking about the G zone a lot, especially in the grade 3 counts, because it's that important. Your ultimate win con overall is doing like usually this into Rene in some combination with another card that we'll talk about later. But this is the most important card, so you have to play it at 4. And obviously with crest, it becomes better because it's 13, but more on that later. This isn't as important as some people think it is. So 4 Oboro, and then to top it off, I play 1 Zunky, mostly because I only had 1, but 5 ride targets just feels solid to me. Like without crest, you can ride this and like going second and still like do something. And without without crest, you can do that. With crest, it's actually very important that you have a 5th ride target because you cannot ride anything that doesn't have Demon Stealth, Advent, whatever in its name. So again, this just helps iron out ride consistency, which is really important because there are times where you have to go crest over Unin, which again, that comes up later in the profile. So 5 ride targets, that just felt very, very solid. Then 3 Stealth Dragon Shiranui. There was a time, 3 Stealth Dragon Shiranui. There was a time where I was playing 4, but it was getting very, very bricky, especially when putting in the 5th Zonky and when I wasn't on crest build, like before the deck set came out. But 3 feels fine. It's the easiest way to get something into Soul for Mizukaze, and it helps with numbers, being a 22k beater. Sometimes the bouncing skill comes up, but you don't have to bounce a rear guard to your opponent's hand. Overall, this card is like, I don't know, it's just one of the best cards in the deck. I think it's been that way for a long time in Nubatama for the grade 3s. Then 2 Mizukaze. I'm going to say it right now. If you could just come up to me. I'm not expecting Bushiroad to watch this at all, but this card should absolutely be banned. I'm not a person that's against that, but while we're playing it, I am going to obviously exploit it. So 2 Mizukaze. It's obviously just like one of the most broken things in premium right now. If you don't know, this basically just says that your opponent cannot guard with grades that they have guarded with or called prior. And obviously that's a very broken interaction with Oboro, because Oboro at the beginning of ride phase says you can call anything from your opponent's drop. And yes, that does add to Mizukaze's condition. So the most basic interaction you'll do is beginning of ride phase, you'll call a grade 0 like a trigger from your opponent's drop. And then once you get done with your like early dominates, you do this, and then your opponent cannot guard with triggers and whatever else they've guarded with throughout that attack. So very broken interaction. Please ban it. And there was a time where I wanted to play 1, but it felt really bad because not just because for when it goes to damage, but there are times where you can't like bounce it back to hand, even though you have a lot of pieces that can do that. And when that happens, you just kind of shut off one of the best parts of the deck. Like, honestly, I think without this, the deck does fall into tier 2, even with crest build. Because again, I don't think crest build's like very win more. It doesn't feel like it's actually contributing towards this other than by like higher ceiling, but you don't really need a higher ceiling when your opponent cannot guard. So Obviously 2 of this. And then last but not least, Forbidal. This is another card that I think will get banned in Premium one day, because there's a lot of decks that are able to exploit this very easily, like this deck, Grand Blue, Dimension Police. It has a way to like literally just search out this card and find more advantage. And obviously in this deck in particular, it can search Mizukaze. So on a very normal game plan, you'll History Stride after searching Forbidal. Then Forbidal will search you Mizukaze and a copy of Stealth Dragon Shiranui. You won't be able to meet this condition yet, but you'll probably have something to bounce him back to hand. This will go into Soul to set up for next turn, and Mizukaze is set up in your hand, safe for a Rene turn. So this card is just contributing a lot, and it's actually very consistent. Like the number of times I'm able to search this in testing and in the event was crazy. I also just hard drew it several times, and hard drawing it's even more broken, because then I'm able to play like a more free game essentially. Like Uni can search Heal Guardians, or I can go into Crest and feel safe with my searches. So yeah, and the grade 3 counts, honestly, without Mizukaze, the deck would get more consistent because there's just so many grade 3s in the deck. One thing I was really worried about in testing was actually bricking on grade 3s, and there were several times today as well where I had just too many grade 3s in hand, and obviously like my record reflects that I did pretty well, but top 8, which is where I actually lost, I did actually have too many grade 3s in hand. And Crest doesn't help that problem either, because you can only ride the Demon Stealths. So more into that later. Now the grade 2s. Grade 2 lineup is actually very, very solid. I like it a lot. It's 4 of the promo guide Seingeki, who's, I'm sure you've seen him by now, him or some version of him. The guide that's top 5 lets you add a grade 2 or less card. Helps ride consistency, not just in the grade 1 department, but also the grade 2 department. He can also find Elementaria if you high roll, which that happens actually more than you think, especially if you're using multiple copies of him. The first skill actually isn't as bad as I used to think it was, especially since Gendatsurukan, the History Strider, also discards. So him in combination with one of these or 2 of these means your opponent has to discard a lot of cards in hand, which is really good in Premium right now because most decks can plus a lot thanks to Harmonics Messiah, so they're able to actually get quite a few cards in hand. And other than that, it's just really good discard fodder later in the game. Now, I don't always use this. If he's the only grade 2 in hand, I won't act like he's a free grade 1, because obviously like riding is more important than finding exactly what you need, because it isn't standard, it is Premium. And he's an okay ride target. It's very nice being able to call like a critical trigger behind him, especially the ones that go to Soul. But this is mandatory while you're playing like so many like important ride targets in the deck. Then to top that off, I play 3 Shoujo Doji. It's so funny. I think out of all 8 games today, I rode him like 6 out of 8 of them, which is crazy because obviously this helps that. But Shoujo does a lot of things that you wouldn't expect. So obviously he does just plus the board, which is good for like early rush. It's good for when you call our next card, which is Yami Shibuki, which we'll talk about here in a second. But the main thing that he can do that actually happened all the time today and was pretty unfair is, since he puts something to Soul, you can put grade 3s into Soul. And so if you have Mizukaze set up or Forbidal, you can do the Forbidal plan that I talked about earlier, where you basically call like Mizukaze and another thing. But if you Shoujo Doji and high roll with a grade 3 in Soul, then you can use Mizukaze's condition on turn 3, which just becomes very, very hard to manage, difficult to manage. Usually your opponent just ends up taking a lot of damage, which makes their next turn even harder to guard. And then the 10k is very nice too for a lot of matchups like DP, Luard. Luard's been gaining in popularity. 10k is very nice. And then just like the Seingeki, he's very good discard fodder later since he's only a really good ride target. Only 3 because I also play 3 Yami Shibuki, and with that it gives me like 6 really solid grade 2 ride targets, which again just helps me dig more for the Seingeki. Yami Shibuki wasn't in my list for a while because I really like Magatsu Gale, but Magatsu Gale's hard plus wasn't as important to me as just being able to put more shield on the board to survive into a Mizukaze turn. And you'll hear me talking about that a lot, but like as disgusting as it is a very solid win condition, which is why I brought it to the event. So Yami Shibuki, again, he bounces the card to hand, get evil decoy tokens, and then just puts a lot of shield on the board. It also helps us towards one of our strides, which is another reason why I put him in, because I was actually missing out on some sealing in my Jizo. So grade 2 lineup, very, very solid. I love this. He's also very important because he's one of the 2 pieces we run to be able to bounce cards back to hand. And sure, you can do that with Mizukaze, but you can also do it with 10k shields. You can do it with triggers that you need to call maybe to hit over force numbers. This card is very, very flexible, and I really, really like him. So that's the grade 2s. The grade 1s, this is the most controversial part. So obviously, since this is a crest build, I play 4 of the Seizui. Now, I want to say right off the bat, I think crest is like, it seems like crest builds in premium are all just kind of like weird, not necessarily bad. Obviously, like they're good, especially when you have like 3 or more cards face up in G zone. Against one of my opponents today, I had 7, so my front row was getting plus 35k, and obviously that feels incredible. But nothing feels as important, again, as being able to get exactly what you need to win. Because writing this almost always today felt secondary to Unin. So Unin is like a safety button, and I really enjoyed using him over this sometimes. Like there are so many times where I open both of these, and obviously like crest feels fun and it feels like you're winning, but Unin is going to usually either search one of 2 things. It's going to search Oboro, that way you can have a game, because if you don't ride Oboro, you're kind of crying. Or if you have Oboro in hand, you can search Forbidal. I had a lot of people like raise their eyebrows or call for judges, but Unin says you reveal a grade 3 normal unit and then search a grade 3 card. So that means you have all your normal units you can reveal, and then you search Forbidal. Or if you already have Forbidal, you can just add like a Heal Guardian. So super flexible card. It also puts cards back into deck, and it comes up multiple times where I'm either putting back like draw PGs, heals, and sometimes the over trigger. Like you break on over trigger, you put it back with Unin. He's the second piece also that bounces cards back to hand, and he's not as easy to do with as it is with Yamishibuki, but he gets to bounce 2 things back to hand. So very often what you can do is call anything in front of him. Mizukaze's in the other column, then you bounce Mizukaze and a 10k shield back to your hand. So Unin is obviously just like a better card. It was designed for something far more than what this was designed for, which was for standard, obviously, and for like a legacy product. But I will say there were 3 games where I rode crest, and I won those games because of not purely because of the ceiling, but luckily I was already set up with everything that I needed. So I do not agree with, I know again it's a bit controversial, but I do not agree with people that are saying that like this is the way to go with Shiranui, because those lists often just play far too many bricks. Like they play the old Kategaritsune, the searcher. Some of them play the new one that comes from the deck set, which you need the crest to be able to use. And some of them play restanders. And that's actually, that's actually a big question I had today, was why wasn't I playing any like Esper Idea or any of the restanders? It's because I was hard calling for this event that there were going to be a lot of people on Honolulu, because of certain lists that we saw from London and not from California, just from London. So I do think the restanders are good. Like Esper Idea, I think is probably the worst out of all of them because he is a grade 4, so he's really hurting the consistency in like the grade 3 department. I think Fudai is the best because sure, Sekie draws cards, but Fudai is giving you ceiling even when you don't hit your crest. So he's gaining at least 10 to 15, sometimes 20k power if you get lucky. And that's much better. And I considered Fudai for a long time, but I was not willing to go down on any of my grade 2s or my grade 3s. And some people might say, wait, don't you have room in the grade 1 lineup? But I really don't, because I actually also play 3 of the, I'll get this out of the way, 3 of the V Kategaritsune. This is probably to most people, the most controversial part of my deck, because obviously if you see this and you don't have these, then you can't G-assist for one of your better ride targets. But I was willing to take that risk because often when I open up with Unin or this and I don't have a grade 3, this will help me search that. Even when I open up with crest, if I have to use crest, I can still use this to find a grade 3. You can bounce this to hand throughout the game, so you're constantly cycling for stride fodder. Or if you haven't found like Mizukaze yet, you play 2, so you find it. Or you can high roll into Forbidal. So again, it was actually like one of the I think my best decisions going into the event. It just felt really, really good. The other thing I was valuing a lot is since I was putting this in, I wanted more just like raw shield value. So playing 5k shields in the grade 1s just feels so bad, and these 10k shields definitely saved me a couple of times. Like, this helps you one card guard small attacks, and obviously I was able to recycle them a lot because of this, because of Unin. And I just right now at least don't agree with the restanders because I think it's greedy. I think it does one of two things. I think the restanders play into Hanali, which I never did. Like, Hanali was never an issue today because I never made it past 5 attacks. You never do without restanders. And I wasn't exploited by certain G guards because there are a lot of clans that can actually get rid of certain attackers if your attack patterns start with a rear guard and not with the vanguard. And so it was a big risk, and I think the first place list actually did play restanders. It's what I lost against in top 8 because he went first. He saw his crest, he saw his restanders. Like, he was just having the game of his life, which is fine. Like, I'm sure that's how he won lots of his games, but I felt far more in control throughout the day because of how well I was able to see every card in my deck. So value it a lot. And then obviously I play like 1 Elementaria. You could cut this to just make space, but I don't think the deck really needs it. Like, this came up in almost every single one of my games just because of how much you go through your deck, and it saved me in OTT. It saved me against Dimension Police, one of them at least. The other one I didn't draw it and I had to get kind of lucky. So yeah, I mean, it's Elementaria. I don't think I have to convince y'all very much. Trigger lineup is, I guess, a little more important than some people would think. So the obvious ones are I play 8 crit, the Stride Fodder, and the Eroded crits. Now, there was a time where I actually wanted to play more. Like, I wanted to try 11 crit when I was still trying to figure out what to do with this slot, because I noticed that I couldn't fit in Sakura Fubuki, like the really good countercharger. So I was trying some countercharge PGs. And the other reason I wanted to fit 11 crit was because I felt like in games where I wasn't really, Mizukaze wasn't happening, the games weren't ending fast enough. And crits are just an easy way to win games. But I did start seeing a need for a piece that was more consistent throughout many rounds. And so I decided to go down to 8 crit and back to 8 crit and back to 3 draw PGs. And I gotta say, like, you can't go wrong with draw PGs. So it did disappoint me a bit because I was enjoying the test, like the few like games of testing where I had 11 crit, but there were also times where I just had like too many raw PGs in hand, and I was actually minusing myself for how much I was discarding off of those. And obviously these are also PGs, but like they're draw triggers too. So damaging them also felt really, really good. This is pretty standard, but I wanted to get into that because there was a time where I was thinking differently. Then the heals, I feel like this is pretty standard, but might as well talk about it. I had a judge ask about it. So I played 3 Heal Guardians and 1 Resource Heal. Again, the main reason I put this in was because I'm not playing Sakura Fubuki, which is the grade 1 in V. That's like a really, really good countercharger. You're able to like countercharge with it, then bounce it back to hand and keep doing that every turn. And since G-Guards do use Counterblast and Rine is a Counterblast, I figured this is just too important, like, to have the high roll. And this came up like maybe 3 or 4 times over the event, and it didn't necessarily save me in games, but it gave me more freedom, especially since Yami Shibuki is such a good card. And so I want to try to use him every turn if I have the opportunity. You know, it's not top priority, but this gives me a little more freedom towards that. So I think those heals worked for me. And then obviously, like I said, you can search this off of Unin. And then over trigger. Not a lot of explaining to do. This actually came up in a lot of games, which is rare for me. I actually don't check this very often. Now for the G-Zone, this is actually like the least optimized part of the build in my opinion. I was so focused on ratioing the main deck because I felt so inconsistent. Like when I was testing stuff like Ungai, who's the one that drops things to 11k. When I was testing Restanders, I was testing grade 1 PGs. That was so much more important to me since I was trying to make a crest build work, that I don't think I actually optimized the G-Zone fully. And but we can still talk about it, obviously. So 1 Harmonix Messiah, because it's Harmonix, like, you gotta play it. Then 2 History Strider, this is obviously correct. This is like 99% of the time going to be your first stride, even going second, because it's just too important to like throw 2 PGs in your hand, it doesn't matter what guard restricts there are, because even against like stuff like the mirror, you call this and it's not a grade. It doesn't enter Guardian Circle, so it does play around Mizukaze, and it takes 2 attacks away from them. So super important. And then don't forget that your opponent discards card. Then obviously for Rene, in perfect games, meaning like everything's going right, these are the only 2 strides you'll ever need. Because this is just going to build you advantage and GB, and then this is just going to do funny haha stuff. And with the crest, it's so funny. Like, crest feels kind of bad with all strides except Rene, because Rene already gives like 10 from his skill. He gives 5, and then the crest gives another 5, so it's plus 20. And that's actually what I think is the most unfair part of the crest, is when you have Rene. So again, like, all that stuff goes really well with the crest, but there are times when I ride the grade 1 for the crest and I don't feel completely set up. That's why I've been telling people, like, I'm not playing a die-hard crest build. So then everything else is toolbox, and this is where again I think some things aren't very optimized. This is something that I added back in because there was a time I wasn't playing token generators, but Jakumeso is really good. I think every list needs to have at least one of him. Not just because Yamishibuki is such a good card, because it is, big beater, bounces cards back to hand, makes free shield on board, but this card draws you into your deck while giving you multi-attack this deck doesn't usually have. It's also pretty much free, as long as Yamishibuki, you keep those tokens, or Yamishibuki is able to make them. And the draw 2 is really important. It often draws me into Mizukaze, or it draws me into bigger shield, or Forbidal, or pieces that I'll need later. And some people play 2, but I don't think the second one can ever come up reliably to a point where you're going to win, unless you're, again, going heavy on crest. Because I won against OTT when I strode this, and they had, a billion Protect 1s in hand, so I didn't want to go Rene. And then I had, 35k to the front row, and this became, unguardable. It was crazy. But one of this felt really good. I really missed playing him, so I'm glad I was able to fit him back in. Then one Dagoku, this card won me a game. I put it in because I was like, hey, this card's a lot better now that people are doing history striders. So basically, if someone goes first against you, a lot of history striders are free, so that either clear the board or draw cards or superior call. So in my head, I was like, hey, going second against those decks, sure, I won't get a bunch of protects, but I will be able to plus and take advantage of that. But the real matchup, what that you need this for, is Dimension Police. Because excuse the dog, sorry. Because if you stride this after they strode first, then you can rip their only 2 Geos that they have out of the G zone, and then their grade 3s cannot intercept anymore, and they lose out on 10k shield, which is huge. I won I played 2 Dimension Police today, and this came up against the second one, and it completely obliterated them. This, and I had Mizukaze too, so I was a little lucky. But I think I've done this once in testing without Mizukaze, and it worked wonders. This card, it saved me a game. So, and I thought about it 2 weeks ago. I was like, hey, I think this card would be really good against DP, and sure enough, it saved me a whole game. So I would definitely play Dagoku right now over Mujin Lord. Some lists are still playing Mujin Lord, and I actually think that's kind of bad. Then one old Mukuro, and one new Mukuro. Sorry, I moved that a little too far. One old and one new. This one still comes up all the time when you just don't have damage. You can plus a little bit, clear board, flip something. The only thing that sucks is the discard, but at least that you're keeping the attack patterns on Vanguard first. This was the worst slot in the G zone. It only came up once in testing, and all day I wish this was something else. This one it's not worth it. It just felt so bad, mostly because the first thing is you have to ditch a Demon Stealth Advent, so you have to kind of what would you call that when you ditch the same copy of the card? Whatever that's called. So that already feels bad. Persona Stride, whatever. So it doesn't come up. So it already isn't going to come up a lot because you already use those for normal stride half the time. It also swings with a rear guard first, which I found in testing is very exploitable by G guards, thanks to Jack. Not shitting on him, it's just true. It's super exploitable. Your opponent's able to remove rear guards sometimes so that you can't actually dominate the Vanguard. And I don't know, it's just like, it never felt as good as, you know, half the other strides. And when there were times where I wanted to Mukuro, I actually didn't have Oboro in hand, so I just had to go to the old one. So I wouldn't play this. I think it was really good as an idea, just to get, like, not have to discard, but this flips. And again, this one is just super, like, gated. I would either trade this for another, like, G-Guard or maybe another copy of Jakumeso if you're feeling that sounds correct. But like I said, this one comes up all the time whenever I don't have damage or tokens. So I would keep this one, and it is a board wipe sometimes, and that's still relevant in premium. And then last stride is the GB8. Didn't come up at all during the event. None of my games lasted that long. I guess long enough for GB8. But I would definitely play this card if you have it. It came up several times in testing. And it has an optional cost, which is a rare thing in Vanguard. It's like Counterblast 1 or Soul Blast 1, which means your opponent can't play around it. And most people don't even know about it. So if your opponent has a big hand late in the game and you're like, I'm going to lose this turn, Rene's not actually going to do anything for me, you can stride this. And then every time your opponent guards, they have to discard 2. So every time they want to do something, they have to get rid of 3 cards in their hand. So it usually just drains hands. It drains DP. It drains Granblue, because Granblue often builds like a really, really big hand. It's drained, I think, Genesis once or twice, and it came up against, it's really good against Mega Colony, because Mega Colony, like the small hand that they do build, like this just annihilates them.
Doesn't it say guard from hand? Does not work against G-Guards?
It does say, yeah, from hand. I wasn't saying, I wasn't bringing up G-Guards.
If you want to cut that part out, I just wanted to make sure.
No, you're fine. You're asking a question.
You said when you guard. Okay.
No, yeah, sorry. It's only guard from hand. Jack's right. I guess that's all I was referring to. Yeah, G guards get around it, but still, often this late in the game, your opponents used like a ton of G guards at that point. Not like, but it is a good question. Makes sense. Just guard from hand, much like Mizukaze. But it's still like sometimes this can even win without Mizukaze, because it's kind of like a first version of it.
Use that with Mizukaze.
Yeah, that's kind of redundant, actually.
Oh, yeah,
but this is like almost like a fairer version of Mizukaze, but late game your opponent usually can't handle it. So very, very good card. And then I also think the G-Guard lineup is kind of weird, because Nubatama G-Guards are kind of bad, but not that bad. So I have one Gondo Kudakan. He's like a free 30k shield if your opponent has 6 or more cards in hand. One More Lord, who's actually the best one, because she's Counterblast 1, make herself into like a 60k shield, or if your opponent has 4 or less cards, she gets shield and you draw a card, which is like insane. Then one Get Orakan. This is the worst one for sure, but I was too afraid to take it out because 90% of the matchups you face, this card is useless, but the 10% where it's useful, it's so important. It's important against Nightmare Dolls. You can take their Leslies. It's important if they make them into boosters in the back row. It's good against Aquaforce. You basically completely shut down their, what's that stride called? The Genbold.
Genbold, yeah.
You completely shut down Genbold if they only have 1 Excel marker.
Yeah, because then they don't have 6 or more regrets.
Yeah, and then so it ruins their attack pattern. And it's really good against spikes. So if your Spike Brothers opponent doesn't know about this G-Guard and they only call one of the grade 1, like Ambush Dexter or whatever, then you actually take away not just like 1 or 2 attacks, you take away like 5 attacks from that deck. So like I said, in testing, it came up a lot, and it's good against Granblue too, because you can, it doesn't always take away attacks, but you can take away pieces that they need to G-Guard into the next turn. So like I said, in most matchups, it's useless, but I was too worried about going against something that I would regret to not play it. And then last but not least, some people would argue this is the worst one. It's the Zashiki Hime. The only reason I play this is because it's helpful in crest to like be able to flip something to just gain a little more ceiling, but it's most helpful for GB8 because again, the GB8 is actually really, really good in this clan. And so there are several times in testing where I had 5 in G zone and I just needed her to push me to 7 so that way I could win with this next turn. But again, this didn't feel super optimized, and this was just bad. Like I would never bring this again. This stride, not the deck itself. But Overall, I've been preparing for this for a long time. The past week I've played the most amount of games, but I'm very happy with the success. It's the most success I've had in preparation for a tournament, and it feels very, very well deserved. Again, huge shout out to the team for always supporting me and for supporting the three of us. Jack, Lupe, and I were on the same team. Huge shout out to my teammates, just because they're always so supportive of me and my premium endeavors. And huge shout outs to all the people at Shenanigans Esports and Gaming. We have a great community there. Thank you all for the support. I hope you liked the video. Please watch all the other top 8 deck profiles that will be up at the channel one day. Don't forget to leave a like, comment, subscribe, and bye.